Sorry about my videos being all black, but I don't really have any pictures to use. I am not the world's best drawer. At all. In fact, I probably draw about as good as a kindergartner. Maybe worse. Anyway, this is a story that is actually a story, like has chapters, not a short story. It is called Gentle Storm, Chapter 1, A True Protector. In South Carolina at Blue Ridge High School, an 18-year-old boy sits down at lunch with his friends. A 16-year-old boy says, "How was your weekend, Jacob?" Jacob says, "Okay, I guess." "What about yours, David?" David says, fine." Jacob says, "Figured." "What about you?" A girl says, "My weekend?" Jacob says, "Yep." "How was it?" The girl says, "Okay, I guess." Jacob says, "You ever notice that our weekends are always just okay or fine?" They both nod. Jacob says, why does nothing ever happen on the weekend? It's only during the week that we all actually have fun, and we're in school. How do we have fun in school? It makes no sense." Dave says, "We are with friends." Jacob and the girl look at each other. Jacob says, "Friends." "Right." The girl looks away smiling and says, "Yeah." Dave says, "Okay. Anyway, I just got a new rank on Call of Duty." Jacob says, "Nobody cares, David. We don't even play that game." The girl says, "Yeah." David says, "So?" A voice says, "We're going into complete lockdown. Please don't panic, but this isn't a drill. We are going into complete lockdown now. All students are to report back to their classrooms immediately." Everyone was out of the lunchroom except for Jacob, David, and the girl. Jacob says, "Oh, great. I wonder what it is this time. Last year it was in the bomb threats. Now what?" The girl says, "Who knows, Jacob?" David says, "Oh boy. Let's just go." Jacob says, "Yeah." They walk out of the lunchroom and enter the lobby of the school. A door blows open. Jacob, David, and a girl say, "Ah!" Jacob says, "What the heck?" Three guys in all black suits and wearing bulletproof armor run through the blown open door and stop when they see Jacob, David, and the girl. Jacob says, "Oh crap." David says, "Shit." The girl says, "Shit." Jacob looks at her in surprise, then back at the guys. The guy says, "Well, hello there, kiddies. You should be in your classrooms." Jacob steps in front of the girl and says, "What do you want?" The guy says, "Oh, well, aren't you brave, stepping in front of the young lady?" He aims his gun at Jacob and says, or should I say stupid." The girl says, "We should run." David says, "I doubt we make it." The gun fires. Jacob says, "Ah!" He covers his chest with his hand. Blood drips down. The girl and David say, "Jacob!" Jacob stumbles but keeps standing and says, "You aren't killing her." The guy says, "Oh, shut up." The girl pushes Jacob. Jacob says, "What are you doing?" The gun fires again. The girl says, "Ah!" She grabs her arm out of pain. Blood drips down it. The guy says, "Dang it, I missed. But I won't miss twice." He aims his gun at the girl's head. Jacob says, "How dare you?" The gun fires. Jacob appears in front of the girl and catches the bullet. The girl's and David's eyes go wide. The guy says, "What the hell?" Jacob crushes the bullet and says, "I'm done playing around. Leave or die." The guy laughs and says, "If anyone's gonna die, it's you, kid, and your friends too. In fact, I'll kill the girl first and make you watch her die." "Hold them both." Two other guys grab David and Jacob and hold them back. The guy, looks up to the girl and says, "You can blame him for you dying first." He points a gun at her head. The girl is shaking like mad. Jacob's clothes and shoes turn black, and his hair turns black and red at the tips. He opens his eyes, and they're red. David looks at him and says, "Oh, shit." Red wings come out of Jacob's back with sharp armor on them. The armor cuts through the guy holding him and sends blood everywhere. The guy falls down dead. The guy aiming a gun at the girl says, "What the hell are you?" Blood drips from the armor. The girl looks at Jacob with wide eyes. Jacob puts the guy up against the wall with his hand right around the guy's neck. The wall cracks. The guy says, The gun lays on the ground in front of the girl. David says, "Hey, what about me?" "I wonder." David faces through the guy's hands. The guy says, "What the hell?" David's eyes turn silver and his hair turns light blue and yellow. Light blue wings come out of his back and his clothes turn light blue. He smiles. The guy catches on fire. He screams, "Ah!" He runs off. The wall cracks more and more as Jacob tightens his grip on the guy's neck. The guy says, The girl says, "Jacob." The gun rotates over into Jacob's hands and he points it to the guy's head and says, "Since you like guns so much." The guy looks at him with pleading eyes. Jacob's eyes glow red and he smiles. The gun fires. Blood goes all over the wall. Jacob drops the guy's body and the girl has her hand over her mouth and she says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe he just did that." David says, "Same here." Jacob looks up to the girl and says, "Are you alright?" The girl says, "But besides my arm, yeah." Jacob says, "Let me see your arm." The girl gives him her arm and says, "Why?" Jacob's hand glows. Then the girl's arm starts glowing. The bullet rotates out. Then the wound heals. The girl says, "Whoa." Jacob grabs a bullet and crushes it and says, "Damn things." The girl says, "Jacob." Jacob says, "Oh, sorry." A voice screams, "Ah!" Jacob looks down a hallway and says, "There's more of them." He runs off. The girl says, "Wow, he's fast." David says, "How is this happening?" The girl says, "I don't know, but my mind is way past blown." In a classroom on the other side of the school, a teacher lays on the ground holding his chest. Blood drips down. A girl in a black suit and bulletproof padding points a gun at a girl. She lowers her gun and turns around. Jacob stands behind her. Two other people in black suit and bulletproof padding in his right hand, both dead. The girl says, "You bastard." She aims her gun at him. Her eyes go wide. She slowly looks down at Jacob's armor stabbed into her stomach. Blood pours out. Jacob says into her ear, "Just so you know, I don't like killing you, but you and your friends have left me no choice. I hope you rest in peace." He pulls his armor out. She says, "Ah." She falls to her knees, then completely over, dead. Jacob drops the other two and says, "Is everybody alright?" They all stare at him in awe, shock, and fear. Jacob says, "Idiots." He runs out of the room and back to the lobby where David and the girl are. He takes in a big breath of air and slowly releases it. He turns back to normal and says, "Are you both okay?" David and the girl nod. Jacob looks at the girl and says, "Are you sure?" The girl says, "Yes. Will you stop worrying?" Jacob smiles and says, "Sorry, I can't help it." The girl smiles and says, "I know." David turns back to normal and says, "Do you even realize what just happened?" Jacob says, "We nearly got killed by like 6 gunmen." David says, "Yes, but also, you became Thunderstorm." His eyes go wide and he says, "Oh crap, I did. That means dark ponies exist. And they'll come for me." The girl says, "So a bunch of ponies come here. What's the big deal?" David and Jacob look at her. The girl says, "What?" Jacob says, "Dark ponies are the most evil ponies that are born. They have armor that is way beyond human technology. There's only one thing that can cut through it, and humans don't have it." Armor appears on his wings, and he says, "My soul armor. The dark ponies would fill the skies like a giant black cloud of death, and then, when they rain down, it'll be a bloodbath. The ponies make changelings look like angels." The girl says, "So why do they want you?" Jacob says, "I'm their king." The girl's mouth drops, and she says, What?" And I will have to continue this in another video, because I'm running out of Video time. Sorry.